My name is JJ Bonta. I'm 14 years old and I'm interviewing my grandpa Winfield Sterling. So, first question. I heard that you and grandma had an anniversary this week. How long have you been married and can you tell me about how you met?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've been married for 54 short years, and it's been a wonderful marriage. Um, yeah, actually, I had met your mother when she was a child because they were neighbors, but I didn't really know her then until I got out of the Marine Corps. And then I saw her in church one morning, and we met after church and chatted and reacquainted ourselves with each other. And it just went from there. I asked her if she wanted to get to know each other a little better, and she said, yep. And so we got to know each other better, and so it's lasted 54 years now.
Oh, cool. Okay. Well, are you ready for the second question?
Give me a try.
Okay, so where are your mom's and dad's families from? Do you know the story of how our family first came to this country?
Yes, I do. I don't know all the details, but I've studied where our ancestry came from, and I actually followed our gene pool all the way from Africa up through the Middle East into Europe. But none of this is recorded for our family. It's just genetic evidence. So then once they got into Europe, part of our family was up in Scandinavia, part of it was in Europe, and part of it was in England. And our first recorded history comes from England. And both the Sterling side of the family and the Knowles and Heacock side of the family all come from England. I thought at one time that we might have some ancestors from Scotland, but that wasn't true, that they all came from England. And then from there, they migrated to the United States, settled in the East Coast. And then some of them got in wagons and ships, boats, came down the Ohio River, got to Kansas and in the area of the Midwest. And from there, they moved to Rio Grande Valley, where many of us ended up. Before then, we dispersed all over the country, and some of our people even went back to Maryland. You guess who that is?
I don't know. Probably with our family. Yep. Okay. Wow, cool. So, question number 3. Can you tell me about where you grew up and what it was like?
Yeah, well, I grew up in the Rio Grande Valley in a town called Edinburgh. And I just think it was one of the best places to grow up there was at that time. It was a very friendly place. It was not highly populated. We were mostly rural people. We grew up on a farm, and so we were kind of farm-oriented. But we had good schools. We had good teachers. We had good friendly relations with almost everybody. Our house was never locked because we just trusted our neighbors. There was no need to lock things. And so it was a beautiful place to grow up. That's not saying that it's the best. I'm sure there's a lot of other good places for people to grow up, but it was a good place. And I'm proud of having lived in Edinburgh.
Cool. Okay. Well, question 4. My mom remembers a story of a baby floating down the canal and being pulled out by the diaper. Can you share that story with me?
Yeah, stories kind of grow in people's mind over the years, and I'm not sure just exactly in this story what is true and what is not, but I'll report it to you as best I know it. Okay. Evidently, my father was growing crops along the Rio Grande River up near Rio Grande City in the Rio Grande Valley. And he had pumps pumping water out of the Rio Grande River onto his crops because it's a very dry area and you need irrigation to grow crops. And I was a toddler, and I guess I got too close to the bank, and I rolled down and fell in the water. And of course, the Rio Grande River is a running river, and so it started to sort of carry me away. And my mother saw me out there, and she was horrified. All I could see was my diaper. And she said to my older brother, Bruce, jump in and save him. And he says, I'm not going to do that. You know, he was afraid of the running water or whatever. And he was worried, you know, about his own safety, I guess. And he wasn't that much older than me, maybe 7 years old or something like that. So I don't blame him at all for making that decision. Anyway, my mother took it in her own hands. She swam out and pulled me back to shore, and apparently saved me.
Cool. Well, okay, question number 5. Do you remember any stories your grandparents told you when you were growing up?
Oh my goodness. Let me see. The grandparents told me. I know, you know, grandparents' stories, but they're mostly written. I do remember the story of my grandfather who went to the gold fields in Alaska, but I'm not sure how much of that he actually told me or told other members of the family. But it's an interesting story because it was one where he grew up. He was not all that old when he went up there, maybe 18 or 19, and he decided, you know, he was going to get rich digging gold up there in the gold fields. And so he borrowed some money from his mother. His father wouldn't loan him anything to do it. His father thought it was crazy. But apparently he hopped a train out to Washington. There he grabbed a ship and went up to Alaska on a ship, and he got off there. And the first thing they have to do when they get off is carry all their luggage way inland because there's a very high tide there. And so the ship lets them off out in the mud where the tide will come over within a few hours. So if they have several hundred pounds of supplies, the first thing they have to do is rush those supplies up onto dry land. And so somehow he accomplished that. And then next, they had this mountain they had to climb, and it had a trail going up it. And it was snow and deep, and they had several hundred pounds of supplies they had to carry up it, so they couldn't make it all in one trip. So he had to go up, come down, get another load, carry it up. And then when they got everything to the top, they had to worry about somebody stealing it. So you had to have a good friend up there that would protect your property while you went down for another load. So once they get all this up there, and it was hard, and a lot of people died doing it, a lot of horses died, and could be really cold up there. When they went up, it was early spring and still very, very, very cold. Then they had to go through customs, the Canadian customs, and the customs required them to have several hundred pounds of supplies in order to let them in. They had to guarantee that they had enough supplies to last a year. And so those that didn't have the supplies just turned around. They had to go back home or go get the supplies or whatever. Then once he got through this Canadian customs, then he had to find a way to get to the gold fields. And the way to get to the gold fields was to build a raft or have an inflatable boat or whatever to float down the river to the gold fields. And so he had this lightweight canoe of some type. I'm not sure it was a canoe, but it was a boat. And he was able to put his boat in, and by himself and with his supplies, he got up to the gold fields. And there he tried digging for gold and didn't have very much luck with that because, you know, most of the good sites had already been taken by the time he got there. Mm-hmm. So he made money by playing his cornet in the dance halls there. And so he made enough money to support his way back home. And on the way back home, he picked a flower along the bank of the river and carried it back to his old girlfriend. And when he got back home, she agreed to marry him, and he presented this flower from the banks of the river in Alaska.
Cool.
So there's a lot more to the story, but I think that probably is more than you really wanted anyway.
Okay, well, for number 6, what was dinner time like with 11 people in the family when you were a kid? Do you remember ever feeling like there wasn't enough food?
Yeah. No, well, not really. There was always enough food, but with that many people, uh, manners can go to the wayside sometimes.
Yeah.
And so when a pile of chicken is presented in the middle of a table and you got 11 people digging in that pile, you don't always get your preferred piece of chicken. So the guys with the longest and strongest arms tended to get their favorite pieces quickest, and us and smaller people, might not get as good a choice. But we always got enough food. We had plentiful food. We had deep freezers full of beef and all kinds of food. We lived on a farm, so we had corn and crops to eat, and our parents took really good care of us that way. But yeah, sometimes, you got your feelings hurt because you didn't get the perfect piece of steak or chicken or whatever at the dinner table. But we had a big table, and they're all good kids. We were all, we'd have squabbles, of course, but nothing serious, and we all got good food.
Cool. Okay, question number 8. Can you tell me one of your happiest childhood... Oh, wait, actually. Question number 7, sorry. How did all of your siblings get along as kids? Did any of them ever pull pranks on each other or have problems getting along?
Well, yeah, there's always problems with siblings.
Yeah.
My older brother could be a little mean at times, and on his sisters, he'd pull their pigtails or whatever and chase them around, this sort of thing. My little brothers claimed that I was a kind of a mean kid too, but I don't remember that. I thought I was a perfect child, but you know how that goes. Our memories favor pleasant outcomes. So yeah, that there were some rivalries in the family, but I think everybody pretty well loved everybody, and it was a wonderful family. I'm very proud of my family.
Cool. Okay, question number 8. Can you tell me one of your happiest childhood memories?
Happiest childhood memories. Goodness gracious. It wasn't bringing the report card home to my mother. I remember that was not ever very happy. I would guess, it had to do with my 4-H calves. Every year I would grow a 4-H calf once I got old enough to kind of handle one. And I suppose maybe I had my first calf when I was 10 or 11. So I was still a relatively small individual. And sometimes those calves would get a little bullheaded and start pulling me around. But I had a couple of calves that won the championship at the Mercedes Livestock Show. And so that made me very proud. Not only proud, but a little bit wealthy for a young kid, because if you have the champion, they sell at a good price. I remember one of my calves got $1.10 a pound, and he weighed 800 pounds. So all of a sudden, I got money in the bank, and I can buy bikes on my own and things like that. So it was a proud and happy time. I have a lot of other very pleasant memories in my life. It was a very good life. I'm a very, very lucky guy.
Cool. Okay. Number 9. What was one of the worst things you ever did as a kid?
The worst thing I ever did as a kid?
Yep.
Oh, my goodness. There's just too many of those to remember them all. Probably uh, being unkind to a sibling or something, but I don't remember any specifics.
Hmm.
Let's see, what was that question? The worst thing I ever did, or the meanest thing, or
I guess, yeah.
whatever? Gosh, I mostly remember when I was a teenager. We did things like pilfer watermelons out of some neighbor's farmland, and that was not a very nice thing to do.
Uh,
But we survived. None of the bullets they shot at us ever hit us. So uh, things like that. Um,
yeah.
I think that's enough.
Yep. Okay. Well, question number 10. What did you think your life would be like when you were older? Has your life turned out differently than you imagined?
Oh, absolutely. No, when I was a kid, I had no idea what my life was going to be. I grew up on a farm, and so I naturally assumed that I would be a farmer. It just seemed natural. I didn't like school very much. Part of that was because I couldn't hear very well. And so I was constantly answering questions that had not really been asked because I misinterpreted the question. And so it was a little frustrating going to school. Um, Let me see. I've lost my train of thought. What was the question again?
It was what did you think your life would be like when you were older?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, so at some point in my life when I was probably a young teenager, I still thought I would be a farmer. And so I kind of took those courses. I took courses in high school like woodworking, and then in college I took several agricultural oriented courses. Uh, and so that's sort of where I was headed. I never thought about academia. I never thought really that I liked school that much. And then that I should end up becoming a teacher the rest of my life seems a little incongruent, but that's the way life is quite often. There's so much luck in life that you just happen into something and it changes the whole direction of your life. And going to college did that for me. But going in the Marine Corps also did it. I found in the Marine Corps a lot of those things I really didn't like very much. And I was very happy to get out of the Marines. I think I was good enough Marine, but yeah, I think it did change my life.
Okay. Well, the next question is the Marine Corps. What led you to joining the Marine Corps, and what can you tell me about that experience?
Goodness gracious. Well, joining the Marines is something that is, or joining in the military is something that was not optional at the time. I was going to be drafted into the military one way or the other. And so a group of my friends decided, well, instead of being drafted into the Army where we'll have no choice of occupations, maybe we should just join, and the recruiter tells us that if we join, we'll have a better option, a series of options. And so I decided I wanted to become work in an airplane tower, guiding airplanes in for landings and things like that. And so they said, sure, we'll let you do that. Just sign the line on the paper here, and we'll take you in and we'll train you to do that. Well, of course, once you become a Marine and you've gone through what they call boot camp, where they essentially, to be a good fighting soldier, you have to obey directions immediately, right?
Mm-hmm.
If your general or your lieutenant says charge that machine gun, you're not supposed to hesitate. You're supposed to just charge without regard for your own safety. And so they're a little brutal in their training, and they essentially take civilization out of you to a large extent to make you into a good fighting man. And so I was very happy to get out of the Marine Corps because I don't like to live under authoritarian rule like that, where somebody tells you, what to do every second of your day. I like to make my own decisions about my own life. But I'm very glad for the experience of having been in the Marines. I got to fly on seaplanes that nobody else has ever seen. I got to sit near ground zero when an atom bomb exploded. I got to go out on ships and do maneuvers on ships and landings on beaches and things like that. And I got to meet a lot of different people. I found out that, all the different races together in our platoon, we could all get along. We weren't all that much different from each other. And so I think it was a good experience, but I have a hard time ever recommending it for my own children.
Yeah. Okay. Well, question 12. What were my mom and her brothers like growing up?
Well, they were absolutely perfect children. They were beautiful, intelligent, never quarreled. Well, let me see. I guess there was maybe a quarrel or two in there somewhere. No, but they, I'm very, very proud of my children. They behaved themselves very well, but they were normal. They weren't goody kids, always doing everything to satisfy their parents. They experimented with life, and I think that's what life is all about, Just hope that we don't make too many bad, horrible mistakes as we're growing up, because you go out and rob a bank, you end up in jail, and that's not a good experience. Nobody wants that. My kids were good kids, and I think they've made very good adults, and they've had good families, and they get good grandchildren for me.
Yeah. Okay. Question 13. What is one of the things that you were most proud of with your career as an entomologist?
As an entomologist?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I started out in entomology at A&M University, I was given the job of studying insects that feed on cotton plants. And so I studied that very hard, and I learned a great deal about it, and I started doing research. And my idea was always to find better ways to control insects to improve the profitability of farmers in growing the cotton crop. Mm-hmm. And so that was essentially my goal. But I found that was pretty hard to do. And I published lots of papers. I had graduate students, and we published great papers, wrote book chapters, and all this stuff. But as I matured, I decided that I wanted to do more fundamental research. I didn't. It's a noble goal in research to do research to help farmers produce a better, more profitable crop. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm proud of that. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to do some things that were a little different, that were just sort of more basic science. And so I evolved into doing a little more basic science. And it worked out well. We published lots of papers. But always in the back of my mind, I always cherished the notion that I was helping advance science and helping the economy of the cotton production system as well.
Cool. Okay, question 14. What are some of the most important things you have learned from life?
Probably the most important thing I've learned is that I don't have all the answers, and that nobody has all the answers, and that anybody that tries to tell you they have all the answers, we should question them and question their reasoning and the logic of individuals, and that we have lots of conflicts in this world, and lots of people, rapidly wanting to go to war with each other. And I think the fundamental thing that we need to learn about is is how to improve our civilization. We go through periods of peace, and then we have a war, and we go through a period of peace, and then we have a bigger war. And we have an awful lot of people dying on this earth in the last 100 years or so from wars. And there are two sides to the answer to that. One side is, well, let's just have peace, and you can just give in to the tyrant, and you can have peace because you surrender, or you can talk with the tyrant and try to talk him out of it, or you can have a very strong defense so that he just doesn't attack you. And so that there's all kinds of solutions, and we don't have the answer to those yet. All our leaders struggle with this question mightily. And so we build up these big defenses, and sometimes we overdo it, and we build some really nasty weapons that actually kill a lot of people too. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but those are some of the ideas that are percolating through my mind.
Cool, yeah. Okay, question 15. You've traveled all over the world during your life. Which trip are you most glad that you made, and why?
I guess I would just quickly pick Australia because I got to take the family with me there for a whole year, and we got to travel around the country and see it and meet the people. And it's a beautiful place to go. There are very friendly people there. There's a few cranks around, and that's good too. You need a few cranks around. But the beaches are pretty, and you learn things about the geography of Australia that, 95% of the people live within just a few miles of the coast, and the vast majority of the center of Australia is just a big desert with hardly anybody but maybe a few sheep out there and kangaroos. The animal life there is just spectacular. Where we lived in the town of Brisbane, we had a rainbow lorikeets that would come in and sit on a tree right outside of breakfast or bedroom windows early in the morning. We had kookaburras calling in the trees out and back. And we got to travel around and see a lot of kangaroos and wallabies and platypuses and all these things. And we went out to an island off the coast of Queensland where we did some diving and it's a national park that's underwater, so you can dive down and see all the big fish and so on. And so we got to do a lot of things there. Our kids, Jimmy and Brian and Ellen, got to experience their school system where they had their own uniforms, and their schooling was different, than it was in the United States. And so they learned a little Australian history, I suppose, as well as then later in life learning American history. So I think it was a good experience for all of us. I've had a lot of wonderful trips around the world, but I think that year spent in Australia is definitely my favorite.
Oh, okay. Last question number 16. Do you have any other memories or thoughts about your life that you'd like to share?
Oh, goodness. Well, I just wrote a story about my wife, Kat. And, we've had now 54 years together, and they've been very, very good years. Like I say, I'm a very lucky guy. And your grandma is an amazing woman. She has one of the most pleasant personalities of anybody you're likely to ever meet. And she's been such a good mother that I give her a great deal of credit for the success of our children. And if our children have had any failures, that's probably my fault.
Okay. Cool. Well, my mom is coming up with more questions right now. Yeah, 2 more questions. So,
okay.
Here we go. So, first one, What did you like most and least about your time living in a motorhome, sorry?
Oh gosh, the freedom it gives you just to pick up and leave and explore. You know, it's an amazing sense of freedom that you drive down the road and you hit a T in the road, you could go right or left.
Mm.
The freedom just to flip a coin and say, well, heads I go right, tails I go left. It's just wonderful.
Yeah.
And then you drive down and you see a little side road that looks interesting. You can just take it, and explore where it goes. But then you can also plan trips so well. And we've done a lot of uh, trips where, like, we did Highway 66 for a while.
Mhm.
And then we did the Great American Highway all across the United States from Maryland clear over to California. And then we came down the Mississippi one time, spent weeks coming down the Mississippi just exploring the thing. We did the Ohio River. We've done so much of Canada. We've been in almost all the provinces of Canada except one in the far north. And we've been all over Mexico several times. So we've met a lot of great people. We get to experience the geography and history, and we never we seldom, I should say, pass up a historic marker anywhere. We like to just stop and read brief histories as they're expressed around the country. And you pick up a lot of interesting things, and a lot of it has to do with warlike things, but there are also signs of this is where a guy grew up that created the first guitar of this kind or something like that. And so it's really a lifestyle that we've enjoyed. But there are drawbacks to it. And the drawbacks we found are that you can get too big a motorhome, that is too complicated. We bought a 36-foot long motorhome that was a beautiful thing and pulled a car behind it. And we traveled all over the United States and Canada for several years and those kind of things. And they were good years, and we had great time, but they break down. There's so many. A big motorhome is a very complex machine, and there's so many little things that can break down. Just a little electric motor somewhere, or a switch that goes back, or a light that goes bad, or the engine dies out in the middle of nowhere. Engines overheat climbing mountains, and you wear things out. And so you spend a lot of time in shops in a motorhome. And that I didn't like. So in our later lives, I wanted to simplify it. And so that's why we decided to buy a smaller, simpler motorhome that was easier to drive around and far less complicated and cumbersome. But we will some day in the not too distant future give up motorhoming because at my age, driving skills are not as good as they once were. And so then I'm perfectly prepared to give it up. We just had 2 motorhomes last year, and we just sold the oldest one recently. And so I'm very glad to get rid of old motorhomes. But it's really a wonderful lifestyle, but not one that everybody can either afford to do or would want to do.
Yeah.
A lot of people are just very, very happy just to stay at home.
Yep. Okay. 2 more questions. So, what has been your most enjoyable hobby or pastime?
Your mom's sitting there asking all these questions, and she knows the answers to some of them, so you could just ask her, and she could probably give you a pretty decent answer on that. But I'll give you mine anyway. Of course, my passions changed throughout my life. When I was a kid, all I wanted to do as a teenager was take my rifle out with my dogs and hunt rabbits or squirrels or birds or something like that. That was my passion then. I grew up of course, my passions changed, my interests changed, and birding became a big thing later in our lives. So we've done a lot of birding, but we're not so serious about it that we're what they call counters, where you always add up the number of birds that you count and compare that with other people and get into competitions about who can count the most birds. We just enjoy nature, so it's not really birding that we're into anymore. I just really enjoy nature. I like to watch the animals and see what they're doing. We've got a cardinal that's built a nest right out our living room window, and so we can't. Every time we go in the living room, we check to see if she's on the nest and how long she's gone and when is she coming back and are the eggs hatched yet? You know, just silly things like that that interest us. Excuse me. Anyway, those are some of the things. Of course, my passion through most of my life was entomology and studying insects, and that was good. It was a good occupation. I got well paid for doing my hobby.
Cool.
Anyway, those are some of my favorite things.
Wow. Okay. So, last question. What advice would you give to my generation?
Get a good education. That doesn't necessarily mean go to the best universities or the most expensive universities. I would say read a lot and be skeptical of a lot of things that people tell you because people have a motive for the things they tell you. And some of the motives are really good and you know, tend to believe what your parents say because they have your best interests at heart. Absolutely. But there are a lot of folks out there that spread bad ideas that don't have good sound reason behind them. And so I find that I would advise you not to be too believing of everything you hear on the news or read newspapers. Check things out for yourself, and you know you'll be fine.
Cool. Okay. Well, those are all the questions. So I guess I should probably hang up to stop the recording. And
Well, I hope I didn't bore you too much with my long answers.
no, that was cool. Yeah. Okay. So, well, bye.
Okay, enjoyed it. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.